is one thing that I've always wanted to be a businessman, to create something out of nothing and to make a difference in the world. I grew up in a family that really frowned upon failure and I had a very strict father. You know, I was put down a lot. So I just found that I wanted to live life on my terms. And that created a lot of conflict and animosity between me and my father. You know, I don't really talk much about that.
Vincent, we met, I think, back 2009. I'd consider you one of the OGs in this business. Did over 1,000 deals, 200 of those with maybe only putting £1 down. So how on earth is it possible to buy a property for £1, take on a property just for £1?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to understand the context behind it, because it sounds all good. And if you hear a message that says you can pick up a house for £1, naturally you're going to be very skeptical, and then you come up with all kinds of conclusions. It's a scam, or it could be, oh, maybe it's just houses are so run down that nobody actually wants. But it's actually more than that. You can't actually buy a house for £1. So just to put it in the right context, the pound is really just a nominal value that you put on a contract. That gives you the right, but not the obligation, to buy a property at a price that we specified today. In other words, it is an option contract. Ultimately, you can exercise that right to buy, but hopefully by the time you do that, the property's value will be considerably higher than your option price. So that's pretty much what it is.
So you're essentially controlling the property with a view of purchasing at some point in the future. That pound locks in the deal for you at that point.
Yeah, that's correct. I think there's a lot of misconception about, you know, all these lease options or rent to buy. It all goes back to the legend John D. Rockefeller, who was the richest man who ever walked the planet.
Yeah.
And he said the key to wealth is to own nothing, but to control everything.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it's true, because we're so obsessed with getting mortgages to buy houses, to get on the property ladder, and we pay our mortgage every single month. We make sure that if you own the house that you bought, you keep up with the mortgage payment.
Yeah.
Because failing that, you're going to get repossessed. So think about it. You're not the one who owns the property until you paid off your mortgage. So who owns your house?
Yeah, you own it on paper. The bank control it.
Exactly, right? But everyone thinks that they own the house, but it's actually your mortgage that owns you for the next 25 to 30 years. So that I guess that's the difference between a property investor who uses a passive income to finance your own home and a homeowner who sees their property being the biggest asset, and they have one mortgage and they work their socks off to make sure that they pay that off throughout their lifetime.
Yeah. So lease options and option contracts, this is something around the sort of early days when we met, started becoming very prevalent at that point. Then it kind of quieted off a little bit. What do you think led to the circumstances? Why was there such a boom at that time? Why was the timing right?
Well, I think it was in November 2008 when Lehman Brothers went belly up, when we were watching on CNN or BBC News. That's the day when the whole mortgage market throughout the world just went belly up, and nobody was lending anymore. So for those people who were doing very well up to that date, me and you included, I'm sure.
I was just getting started in that time, yeah.
That was a time when we realized there are no other options. So those who decide to succumb to the circumstance would just either, sell up if they could, which was extremely difficult at the time, or they just got their entire portfolios repossessed. So in other words, it was Armageddon.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a situation where I had a number of properties that were waiting to be remortgaged, to release equity to pay for everything. But it was all stuck.
Yes. The assumption was we just can carry on remortgaging and keep on.
Right. And a lot of people saw the remortgage money was an income, which it wasn't, is a debt, which you have to use it for financing other purchases. But that game was over, just literally overnight. So just me being me, I was just wondering, okay, listen, everyone is so reliant on mortgages. Is there another way? Then I think that's when my MBA degree, when I studied finance, learning about options and futures, and there was this particular instrument, which is a legal contract that is used throughout the financial markets, and I heard that it was also used in commercial properties. People use options to control land, but then why not residential properties? So one thing led to another. I started to really contemplate on what circumstance would create a situation where the seller would consider granting an option to the buyer, and what would the buyer give the seller in return?
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that property negotiation is not all about getting the best price. Sometimes you get a better deal if you negotiate on the terms.
Yeah.
With my experience of speaking to thousands of sellers, I realized there are quite a number of them who were selling up not because they needed the money. Well, many of these sellers actually simply didn't have enough equity in their home. So even if they did sell, they were not going to make anything out of it. But the motivation behind it was they just want to sell so that they could stop paying the mortgage.
Yes. Get away from the pain of the debt.
Right. So the logic would be, if I could alleviate that debt by promising them I would pay the debt, the end result was the same for them, that they could move on immediately. Yes. So what's in it for me to take over their debt? Well, two things. Number one is I could rent the property out, and hopefully I can get more for the rental than the mortgage payment that I'm committed to, which is what a lot of people are doing today, is known as rent to rent. So you rent from the seller and then you rent the property out for a high amount. But then I thought, no, that's not good enough for me, because after all, you invest in property for two things. Number one is the cash flow, which you get, but what about the capital appreciation? That's the big payday. Yeah. Then I thought, wow, the option actually would allow that, because if I could fix the price today for a number of years, because every option contract has an option period, and the longer that period is, the more opportunity I have for the property price to increase. Yeah. And I can buy at a lower price, then that means all the capital appreciation would belong to me. And so when I figured that out, I needed to test it out with some sellers. Some just simply didn't know what I was talking about. So I guess it's not so straightforward just doing lease option. You have to be able to pitch it, right, in such a way that they know what
That's the biggest mistake I made when I first started.
Yeah.
I would just overwhelm them with information and they'd be so confused. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's the saying that if you lose them, if you confuse them, you lose them. And then so I started working on my pitch, focusing on what's in it for them. And, sometimes there's a saying that you can't explain something to a 60-year-old. You don't understand it yourself. So at the time, I was still struggling to come to terms with the whole thing. Until there's one lady I spoke to, I said, look, just that one thing. I would take over your mortgage payment. I would take control of the property. I can rent the property out. But if we fix the price for the purchase for the next 10 years, that means all the future capital appreciation would belong to me. Would you be okay with that? So we're just waiting for the response. And the lady said, well, the situation was she was going through a very painful divorce at the time. And she had a lot of painful memories in the house. And her answer was, Mr. Wong, I don't care if you make £1 million from this house. I just want to get out today.
Wow.
Then I knew I got it.
Yeah.
So it's by focusing on their needs rather than forcing your agenda is what allows you to do a deal on the terms. So there's a lot of negotiation that involves communication skills. And that's where it started.
Yes. And there was a huge boom in that time. That's when I first started learning about lease options.
Yeah.
And I think there was still a strong demand from people wanting to buy property. The biggest challenge at the time was, well, the funding wasn't available. So it was the means weren't there to buy. And lease options just opened up the door to still be able to take on more. Yeah,
I think the problem with lease option and rent to buy is that the concept is simple, it's beautiful, and it works. But when it comes to doing it, you can't just go out and do some lease options. You have to find the sellers in the right circumstance.
Yes.
For example, if someone has got a lot of equity in their homes, why would they want to let you take over the mortgage payment without trying to sell, even at a discount, and cash out? So first of all, you have to find the right leads, the right sellers in the right circumstance. And then you've got to have to understand the contracts and how to pitch it in such a way that you can handle a lot of objections. So typically the seller would be asking, why do you have to lock me in for 10, 15 years? What if you don't pay my mortgage? What if you die? Or what if I die? And what if I go bankrupt? And things like that. I think there is a lot of misunderstanding and smoke and mirrors, and people have started teaching lease option themselves without really fully understanding the implications, the ins and outs of it. I think that is the issue. And then people just thought, you know what? Oh, let's give up. But I think the bottom line is, if you educate yourself and you really get proper information about how to do lease options, is one of the most powerful strategies, especially in today's market, that's so applicable, that will create win-win situations.
Yes. We talk about today's market. So this time last year, house market was on fire. People are queuing up to buy property. They were fighting with each other to try and get their offer in and buy property as the property was going out of fashion. So when we talk about finding people in the right circumstances, we're talking about people that are keen to sell, someone that's motivated and needs to sell their property. And as you said, generally we look for a discount in that price. But of course, there could be flexibility in the terms, the way that deal's put together.
Yeah.
But over the last few years, it's probably been more difficult to sell that because, I've got 5 people waiting outside to buy my property. Why would I want to give it to you in this way? A reduced price or some kind of flexible terms. But all that's starting to change now. The timing of the market, I certainly believe, will be the lease options is now going to be a huge opportunity maybe for the next couple of years.
Yeah, you're spot on. Now more than ever, you'll find sellers in situations in which they need to get rid of their mortgage liabilities.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that those opportunities have not been around, even when the market was booming. And I think one typical mistake that most people make is to play the estate agent's game. Because agents are in the business of hyping and inflating prices. And I still remember years ago in an auction, there was a property that was, the guide price was 110,000. I did a RICS valuation on it and it came back at 185.
Okay.
So I knew, because back in the days we didn't have home track or anything like that, so I did actually do a RICS valuation. And so I was quite confident that if I could bid all the way up to maybe 160, I would buy this property at below the market value.
Still some profit.
Yeah. So I was very excited. I brought my new wife with me and her parents to show them how a deal is done. And then the first bid was 200,000.
Wow.
And the gavel came down at 345,000.
Wow.
So there are people who would play this game engineered by estate agents called FOMO, fear of missing out. And it just happened. What exactly happened was that the day before there was an article in the Sunday Times, because it was back in, I think, 2003 or 4 or something, and they were saying house prices going through the roof. If you don't buy in London now, you'll never afford to live in London. So these homeowners, home buyers, investors would bid for a property and pay any price for it regardless of its value. And that is the main problem we find. Even investors today, even buy-to-let investors who claim themselves to be professionals, are paying full price for a property for the future opportunities, which is wholly speculative.
Yeah.
A good investor would look at what the value, the true market value of the property is, and attempt to buy at below the market value. So, opportunities are everywhere. Even when the market was booming, we did a lot of deals leading up to 2008 before the market crash. The key is to find the right sellers in the right circumstances. And they exist. You're always going to find sellers who are selling because of either financial issues or relationships, or maybe they just can't stand the hassle of dealing with agents. So it is, after all, a people business rather than just about the market.
And what sort of marketing methods, techniques, or approaches do you think work really well to try and find people that are the right people to have those sort of conversations with, right type of sellers?
That's a very good question. A lot of people ask, hey, Vince, do you do leafleting? Do you set up a website? Do you do social media marketing? The most important thing is it starts with you, how you position yourself. Because when you're faced with a seller who is very motivated to sell, you have to project yourself as someone who can offer a solution better than an estate agent can. So you have to create that differentiation. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, do people know that you buy houses? You're an investor. And also, how do you buy the houses? Are you a first-time buyer? Do you have to get a mortgage? If I sell my house to you, are you going to be stuck in a chain? And what if the chain breaks? And that means the whole deal will fall apart. So you're going to have to position yourself as someone who can proceed very quickly. You have the credibility, you have the trust. And the bottom line is, how likable are you? And what I've found is just so amazing. There are quite a number of deals, in fact, many, that the seller would rather sell the property to me, but my offer was lower than this other company.
Yeah.
Because they prefer it.
Yeah, people will buy from people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And if they like you and the likability factor, as you said, is there, that's more important to somebody. If we think about when's the last time we bought something that was quite substantial from somebody we really didn't like, well, it doesn't really happen.
Yeah, that's correct. And one of my students who is hugely successful today, he's from Birmingham, you know Daniel.
Yeah.
In the early days, he was very gung-ho, knocking on doors, wearing a nice pinstripe suit, saying, "Hey, I am here to buy your property." And he had so many doors slammed in his face. And then he was very smart. He decided to change his approach. He decided to dress up as some sort of painter decorator with sort of paints on his jeans, and knocked on the door saying, "I'm looking for work. Do you need anything done?" And they said no. So immediately the barrier came down.
Yeah.
So he took out a makeshift card. He didn't even have money to print cards. He actually wrote his number to say, "Well, I also buy houses. If you know anybody who needs to sell the property quickly, I offer a referral fee." Apparently, through one seller, he got 5 deals out of that.
Wow.
And in the first year, he flipped 21 property deals altogether. That's an amazing story.
That is.
Yeah.
One of the things is when people start, they hear about these things, and I struggled with this when I started back in the early day. You'd hear about one strategy and you think, oh, that's a strategy for me. You dip your toe in it a little bit, and then you hear somebody else talking about something else sounds interesting. You're off doing that thing. But we don't really focus on doing one thing and doing it well to get the result.
Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody who's starting out and who's constantly getting distracted by all these shiny pennies around us?
Well, I think it's good to know the different strategies available for different circumstances. But these are nothing more than just tools in a toolbox. Your strategy needs to fit the seller's circumstance and yours as well to make it win-win. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you are starting off and you don't have any capital, you don't have any income, and you're not qualified for mortgage, then there's no point trying to do a deal that involves finance. So now you're going to have to learn how to either raise capital, joint venture with other people, or learn how to control this property and flip the deal. And that's how a lot of people started. That's how I started. I didn't have a lot of capital. I started my business selling property leads and deals, and that's how I generated capital.
I remember the website.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to be mindful of the different strategies available, but you have to be intelligent enough to apply the right ones for the right circumstance.
Yes.
And do that well. So like Daniel, he became really good at flipping deals. So he would just focus on that in the first year, and he flipped 21 deals. And then when he had enough money in the pot, he was about to buy his next property, and that next property turned out to be 45% below the market value. So when he refinanced after he bought it, had another 6-figure cash back. He was struggling to spend his capital, but he started his first deal. He flipped, only got $3,000 for it. But it's $3,000 that he never had. But like you said, your first deal gives you so much confidence. So, and also, I came across some students saying that, oh, my first deal is going to be a £10 million deal. Come on, right? I know we say that you need to think big. But I also say that you need to act small to begin with. So think big and act small and focus on the small deals. Small is beautiful. And then you do bigger deals as your confidence grows.
Yes. Yeah. You could get your fingers into a bigger deal at the beginning and not know what you're doing. So you don't know what we don't know. And then actually that could be enough to wipe you out completely before you even get started if you make mistakes on that.
Definitely.
The risks are much higher.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, so when we're looking for motivated sellers, it's understanding a broad approach to property investing. As I said, we refer to them as tools. What tool might be the right one to use in this particular situation to get results. So having some understanding of multiple strategies is important, particularly when we're working with somebody that might be motivated.
Yeah.
How's that compared to, say, for example, you pick one strategy in one location, so that's the thing I'm going to do here?
That also works. There's a saying that you put all your eggs in one basket, but you watch your basket very carefully. And that also works. And so you become the go-to person. For example, I mean, experts like yourself, you focus on development and HMO, and you're good at that. So there are plenty of those deals around. And I think you're so right in saying that, while you are aware of all the strategies available, you need to be an expert in one thing.
Yeah.
So in business, I always suggest that you go niche before you go broad. You have to niche before you go broad. So when I first started, I was known as the lead daddy. So if you need a BMV lead, below market value, for anyone who doesn't know what BMV stands for, they came to me. I was the number one lead seller in the UK, and then I started packaging deals, and I became the go-to person for the deals. And you mentioned Berkshire Property Meet with Just One Sylvia, going back all these years ago. I remember in an inaugural meeting, they literally just met at a pub. So I just sent an email to my database, which is just literally less than 1,000 people, to say that I'm going to be there. You want to, meet in person for the first time. Apparently, just one came to me and said, "Vince, you better be quick because they're all here to see you. They all want to have deals. They all want leads. They want below market value deals." So it's important to be known for one thing. And in property, there are people who are known for the completion process. There are people who are known for, like Just One Sylvia, organizing networking events, and for you, HMOs. For others, maybe just debt collection. But somehow, when you become associated with an expertise, people automatically assume that you're an expert in everything. And that's amazing, because I was known afterwards. I became known as the pioneer of lease option in the UK, and then afterwards other countries. And then I started speaking on stage. And the moment I stood on stage, people started throwing money at me, saying, "I've just been, I've just inherited 50 grand or 100 grand. Can you invest for me?" So I think the positioning is so important. And it's just like, for example, people who want to have an online business, like the health and fitness industry. If you say that I'm here to help you lose weight, I'm the health expert. That's way too broad. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to narrow it down to, okay, my expertise is to help men over 50, not just to lose fat, but to get a six-pack ab.
Yeah. You
become known for that person as the expert, then you can afterwards sell everything. Yeah. Look at Amazon. Amazon used to be the expertise. They're known for books online, and now you can get a pack of crisps.
Yeah.
So go niche before you go broad. Same in property. Be good at one thing, and then you attract more eyeballs.
Yes.
And investors.
Yes. If I look at my own journey, for the first couple of years, I really struggled to get any kind of results. I was all over the place. And that only started to change when I just focused on one thing and not get distracted by the things, and do that thing really well. And when that was really established and that was progressing, and then you kind of sidestep a little bit to something related and then start working on that. It's that the model of having something an inch wide and a mile deep.
Yeah, exactly.
Having that expertise. And then by some strange way, your competition reduces. You have less people that are competing with you at that depth of knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're the only person who's doing a particular thing, then you're the expert. And you can claim that expertise so easily.
Yeah.
It's just fortunate that in 2009, I claimed that expertise as the pioneer of lease option, because few people actually were doing it. So again, if you think that you're good at something, just don't wait to be perfect. Just go and do it.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes we overanalyze these things and talk ourselves out of doing something and miss the opportunity. So talk to me about how the transition happened from active property investor to start teaching and sharing knowledge with other people, because some of your events are like you have 1,000+ people turn up to learn about property.
Yeah. So in 2009, and that's when we had to start looking at multiple streams of income, when you couldn't do property deals in the traditional way. So apart from doing lease option deals, which was a bit shaky at the time, it's touch and go. A lot of deals fell through because you weren't that good at doing something.
Concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I for sure was that while I was doing it, I knew a lot more about the subject than anybody else. So with my business partner then, we decided to start a first workshop because there was a huge demand for it. So what happened was, very quickly we put together a book, which is, we're talking about, it's just so ridiculous. It's called Step-by-Step Guide to Lease Option, which was a self-published book. It was just so flimsy, full of spelling mistakes because, my business partner was dyslexic and I was not an author in any way. But we published it and we started waving around to say that we're the first author in the UK on the subject of lease option, which was the case. And that established my authority. And then we sent an email out to our database to say, well, who would like to learn? And then, okay, so how much we could charge them? Well, put it this way, if you are the only person teaching one thing, then you can charge a lot, right? If you're in California during the gold rush, if you're the only person providing the tools, you're going to make more money than the people who are panning for gold. So we thought, you know what? £1,000. And our first event was full. We had like 30 people, right? We just thought, wow, this is really good. So that gave us the idea of monetizing our knowledge. And I think it's fantastic because I had to do a lot of work and make a lot of mistakes from doing lease options and pitching and getting the contracts cost, 50 grand, which was money that I barely had at the time. I had to raise it. Then why should people not pay for your knowledge and think that there is an entitlement that it would be free?
Yeah.
No doubt today there's a lot of free knowledge everywhere, but when it comes to real expertise, I believe that the quickest way for you to get yourself from where you are to where you want to be is to actually invest in your education with real experts.
Yes.
So that's how we decided to start a training company. And then we eventually branch out to teaching, business entrepreneurship, lead generation, negotiation skills, and then trading. And that's how our company, Wild Dragons, was born in 2009. And exactly 10 years later, we became the first training company in the UK to be listed on the stock exchange from scratch.
Yes.
And so we're very proud of that. So now I'm working harder than before because I've got hundreds of shareholders, but it also really makes me feel so alive because it's one thing that I've always wanted to be a businessman, to create something out of nothing and to make a difference in the world, especially now we're going to e-learning, that I believe is going to be the medium through which we can reach billions of people.
Yeah. I think in the early days, one of the challenges was a lack of information. So is you share knowledge and you build knowledge and expertise and you share that with people. We seem to have gone from one extreme to the other where there's an overload of information. It's just so much information, but often it's poor quality information.
Yeah.
How does someone decipher what is meaningful and useful? And
well, actually, back in the days, it's not that there was a lack of information, but people were very closely guarding the information.
Yeah.
And I had to, there's one mentor, I'm not going to name any names, I had to pay £15,000 just for 2 days of mentoring.
Wow.
But that mentoring changed the way I did property deals for the next 15 years.
Okay.
So it was a ridiculous amount of money at the time, but now looking back, it's peanut compared to what I invested in. So how do you find out? Well, that's a good question. Well, I think somehow you need to find someone who's authentic. And I think you can only judge by yourself, but of course through recommendations as well. I think in general there are more people who don't like painful education than people who do, and those who do will tend to. There's a saying that when the student's ready, the master is there. I'm still investing in my education, and recently I invested, tens of thousands on this particular company. It just happened that they appeared at the right time as my business required it.
Yeah.
And the things that people say, your mentors through the marketing have to strike a chord with you. It has to make sense, rather than buying into this, nonsense dreams and the hopes.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to see the steps. So I would make sure that you speak to your prospective mentor coach and ask them, what is the roadmap to get me from where I am to where I need to be? It needs to be very, very clear. 5, 7 steps. And if it is not clear, it just all gobbledygook. So do a lot of research, speak to people, look at feedback on Trustpilot and look online, and then make your mind up. But I do advocate investing in your education, because I truly believe that that's the quickest way for you to shortcut your success. Although there's no shortcut.
Yeah.
I mean you can
increase your chances of success.
Right. You eliminate a lot of trials and errors, and you just do the things that you need to avoid.
So if you see sometimes people in a room learning, you've got 50 people in a training room, they're all learning the same information from the trainer. We get those same people back a year later. The vast majority haven't achieved results. What do you think is it that's happened in that process that prevents people from getting the results?
I think your motive for attending one of these events has to be that I'm going to extract whatever information and value from the coach or the mentor and implement it immediately. It's a speed of implementation. I think some people simply have false expectations to begin with, believing that these training programs are going to guarantee them the wealth.
Yeah.
And so hence they will ask questions like, what guarantee do you offer? How quickly can I get my results? How much time do I need to invest in this venture or this property business? Well, these are wrong questions, because the responsibility of extracting value is on the part of the attendees of these events, and it's down to them to take action. No matter how hard you try as a mentor, you cannot force people to take action. Yeah. So there's no such thing as guaranteed results. You can only guarantee that you deliver exactly as you promised in such a way that it works, is the results are proven if you stick to the process and the procedures.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people don't. I think it's very much the Pareto rule of 80-20. 80% of people won't take action, 20% will, but the 20% of the 20%, which is the top 4%, will be the shining stars.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you want to be in the 80-20. Yeah. It's all down to you, really.
What do you think is in the lack of belief sometimes people have that gets them started? Because often it's that fear of the first step.
So much. I'm sure you've come across a lot of students, after they've learned the whole process, which is irrefutable, that it definitely works because it's proven to work. You just have to do it. It would take them either maybe a year and a half or 2 years before they really plug up the courage to do the first deal. And then they realize, oh my goodness, why have I waited that long? So I would say definitely you need a lot of hand-holding. And I think by default, as human beings, we sort of retreat to our safety zone, our comfort zone, because that's the safest place. But all the solutions to problems lay outside of your comfort zone. And are you going to get out there yourself? I mean, how much do you motivate yourself?
Yeah, it's easier not to do something than to try something that might go wrong.
Completely.
Yeah.
The fear of making a mistake. But the reality is you will screw up.
Yeah.
And you have to embrace that screwing up means finding ways of how not to do something. But most people just see failure as the end game and try to avoid it. I think that's to do with, people's upbringing, being born and bred in the UK, but from, really strict Chinese parents. If we made a mistake, we'd be thrashed to a pulp. We would be scolded so badly. So I grew up believing that, making mistakes are bad until it was very later on in my life that I realized mistakes are so invaluable to learn and grow and to feel alive. And your job as an entrepreneur is to not go down and not give up altogether. And you keep thriving in those environments of uncertainty and mistakes, and you keep going and you keep learning, you will succeed. But it's also important that you don't make the same mistakes over and over again. I mean, a mentor actually once said to me, Vince, you make the first mistake, that's fine. You make the same mistake the second time, you're a silly boy.
Yeah.
You make the same mistake the third time, you deserve to be broke for the rest of your life. I always took on board what was said to me.
In property, we talk about it as a property business or property investing, and there's often a belief that this is like a side hustle people do, and many don't treat it as a business, like a traditional business. They don't think about property as a business. Why do you think there's a disconnect in people's mindset generally, that property isn't seen as a business?
Well, I think traditionally and culturally, there's a saying that an Englishman's home is his castle, I guess, applies to female and whatever gender now, right? So our belief system is that our home is our biggest investment. And that's why in Britain, we're so obsessed with home ownership compared to European counterparts, where most people rent.
Yeah, you don't see that there.
They think a house is a place to live in. So most people just think that, okay, as long as I pay my mortgage, I have a job, I'm safe, I've got an investment, and then it will grow, and then near retirement time, I will downsize, and I'll live a quiet life, comfortably. And that is the mindset. So for that, that's fine. I mean, it's better than not having a home that you own. But the mindset is that I would be very much dictated by circumstances. For example, if I don't have any finance, I can't get a mortgage, I can't do this. And that's what takes a lot of people out of the game today. When you talk about property investing, they say, well, it costs a lot of money, right? But the reality is, if you treat property as a business and you call yourself an entrepreneur and you don't have any capital, what do entrepreneurs do when we don't have capital to start a business? We raise capital.
Yeah.
We try to find ways to overcome obstacles and difficulties. That's what we do. We think we never say, no, we can't do this. Instead, we ask, how can we do it? So just write down on a piece of paper, maybe 30 ways in which I could raise capital. That includes selling my clothes, rob a bank, and all that I would. But what you're essentially doing is to start tapping into your right brain.
How can I?
How can I?
Yeah.
Because I think from my years of being in business, most solutions to my problems had not come from my left brain, the logical brain. It's always the creative side, the crazy side, the side that says, you know what, screw it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I'm going to say yes to it. And it always works.
Figure out a way.
Yeah, and that's why my book is not called Another Buy-to-Let Bible. It's called Property Entrepreneur. You're going to have to cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset so that whatever circumstance, high interest rate, regulations, or problems with tenants, you overcome them because you see it as a part of the system. For any system, for any business to work, you're going to have the right mindset. You have to have the right capital, access to capital, the right team, the right people, and that's how it is. Because once you figure that out, how do you explain how some people are hugely successful in property with portfolios worth tens of millions, while others struggling to get on a property ladder?
Yeah,
it's a complete shift in the way you think.
And often they create the opportunities because many successful people you see start with nothing. They didn't have the advantage or they had money. Sometimes that's the case. The vast majority, they start with nothing and they have that drive of how can I, and they find a way. And that's what creates massive amounts of success.
100%. I always say that having money is actually a moral hazard because the more you have it, the more you're frivolous with it. You don't think twice about spending it. One example, let's say you've got £100,000 as a startup capital. Most people will be so gung-ho in just buying the next property that they like, what they consider in a good location, and then that capital will be tied in a property for years before you even see it, because you have to wait for the property to go up in value in 5-7 years' time before you can refinance.
Yeah.
When someone doesn't have any capital and I have to borrow and raise 100 grand, I will make sure that the next deal I do is going to be a cracking deal with a big discount so that I can refinance immediately to pay back my investors with interest so that I can recycle my capital to buy my next property. So actually having money is the worst thing you can do. So you cannot blame not having capital for the only reason why you can't start a business. Is not having this.
Yeah. And in terms of getting started, we touched on the changes that happen in the property market. Over the years, you've probably seen lots of changes, various cycles happen. So with where we are now in the marketplace, where do you see the opportunities of somebody starting out? What should they be thinking about? What route should they be looking to follow?
I believe the first thing is to understand the fundamentals in property, to educate yourself first. Don't just buy because someone says that this is a good area. That's wholly speculative.
Yeah.
If the cleaning lady walks into the room and say, "Have you heard of Ethereum and Bitcoin?" You know that is too late. Don't play the game. First of all, just understand the fundamentals between the price and the value. I think that's so important. Recognizing that all those listings you find on Rightmove and Zoopla are prices that are inflated by the estate agents. They're all hyped up. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to put in an offer based on those listed prices, you're not getting a discount at all. So you need to understand how to value a property. And why it's important is because that's how banks will refinance your properties based on the value, not the price you pay. So you buy property, you pay a price, the bank will give you a mortgage to buy property on the price, but refinance on the value. So what you need to do is to make sure that you pay a price for less than what the property is worth. So an example would be, let's say you see a very rundown property and you don't know what is the price to pay for it today. Well, the way to do it is to work backwards, to find out what the end value is when work is done to it. It's spick and span, is completely done, and that is the gross development value. So you've got to have to understand what that is. And then knowing that the bank will refinance on that, how much they will loan to you, you work out how much I can release on the refinance, minus all the development costs and all the other costs. What is left is the maximum amount you will pay for this property today so that you don't use any of your own money. So it may sound confusing to you, but I would say investing in property blindly is the worst thing to do. And that's why, everyone should learn from people like Sarge, like yourself, me as well, from other experts. You need to fully understand, if you're going to do HMOs, what are the regulations, what are the pitfalls, what should you watch out for? You could lose money in property. And I believe investing a sum of money to bolster your knowledge base is far superior to making a lot of expensive mistakes. I've had one student, I remember years ago, she actually booked to come to my lease option course, and that was going back many years, as a lady. And then she cancelled in the last minute. I think she paid, she's supposed to have paid maybe £2,000 for it. Mm. And then she called up to say, well, actually, no, I've decided I'm not coming to save the $2,000, which is fine. You can do whatever you like. What happened was she'd just inherited 50 grand from a deceased relative, and she decided that she would use that money to buy deals from this person who was actually one of the very well-known property mentors at the time.
Okay.
And the deal was actually 10 lease option deals, so 10 contracts, so it works out $5,000 a contract.
Okay.
So she thought, why do I need to learn from you when I can just buy a portfolio? So, okay, well, it's up to you. I bet at the time she didn't even know what she was getting herself into. And then a month later, she called up saying that she completed on the deals. But what she didn't realize was that most of the tenants had already left the property.
Okay.
The majority of those properties were in such a dilapidated state that each one would cost at least 20, 30 grand to repair. She asked me, how do I extricate myself from these deals, from the contract?
Yeah.
I said, well, unfortunately, I don't think you can. You may want to speak to a lawyer.
Yeah.
So even, you see, there are lots of property deals being offered.
Yeah.
You know, they go around the block. But if you're not even educated in knowing what makes a deal, then simply by using money to purchase what you think is well, as a shortcut, it's a surefire way of losing money. Yeah. Another student of mine, I told him, don't do a deal and spend money up front without signing the lockout agreement, which we use all the time. And he said, no, you know, I know the seller very well. You know, he's like my best buddy. And the property wasn't mortgageable at the time. Okay. So he decided that he would get planning, he'd pay for the planning, pay for the development to the tune of like 30 or 40,000 pounds, right, so they could get a mortgage.
Okay.
What happened was he did the work and he came back to me and said, Vince, what do I do now? I've been trying to email, I've been trying to call this guy, and he's just not replying to me.
The seller saying, thank you very much for spending 30 grand on my house.
Yes. Yeah. So education, and you want to save a few £1,000s because education is expensive. I would say lack of education is the most expensive.
Yeah. And it's in property, we talk about very large amounts of money, hundreds and hundreds of £1,000s, sometimes millions of pounds. And those small mistakes can lead to huge losses. So the lady you were just talking about, so rather than her buying 5 assets, she's ended up picking up 5 liabilities, not realizing the difference of what she's ended up.
It's a fine line between an asset and a liability. You just hit the nail right on the head. A lot of people think that all assets, all properties are assets. Yeah. It's so untrue. Especially, I do a lot of deals in Southeast Asia, especially in Malaysia, and people buy these new launch properties from developers, being promised that, you know, the house price would go through the roof, and these developers will structure deals such that, you know, these investors didn't even need to put down any money.
Right.
So it's a true no money down deals. Essentially, what they did was they inflated the asking prices, colluded with some banks to give the deposit. So in other words,
it's different what was happening here many years ago.
Exactly. We've been there, done that, worn the T-shirt. So I warned a lot of investors before, you know, just since 2008, and nobody listened, you know, and but all these properties they bought were all in negative cash flow. Wow. And the mentality was, it's okay because, you know, the capital appreciation would compensate for it. But of course, Malaysia, actually, the property market crashed.
Right.
And people were selling up. And so people have actually got a whole bunch of liabilities in their hands.
Yes.
They can't actually sell them. So the only way out of it is to see whether you can structure something like rent to buy to get, you know, newcomers in and they can pay you more rent to stack the deals better. But yeah, you can bag yourself a huge liability if you're not careful.
Yes. Vincent, you've been traveling around the world teaching property and sharing your knowledge. How do you find the principles of property investing vary in different countries?
Good question. I had to overcome a lot of cultural skepticism around the world. So, for example, I was teaching in Singapore and Malaysia and also in the Netherlands. They've got very different systems. And so people often challenge me, oh, you're from the UK. I mean, what do you know about our system? We're different, da, da, da. Well, maybe so, and I don't dispute that. But there's one thing that is universal to all countries are the people, the sellers. Yeah. Sellers sell properties for the same reasons. Doesn't matter whether you're black, white, brown, yellow, pink. They all have the same needs, the same circumstances. So when people ask me, does your system work in my country? The first question I ask them is, do people have mortgages in your country? The answer is yes. Okay. I mean, do people sell the properties because they go through a divorce or maybe they've lost their jobs? Oh, yeah. Well, in that case, you can negotiate a discount. And it's the same. Yeah. There will be technical differences when it comes to, you know, maybe the mortgage finance, the loan to value,
implementation of the
implementations. Yeah. But as an entrepreneur, again, you work with those parameters and find a solution.
Yeah. It's even with a lease option in this country, as you said, you know, 30 years ago, nobody was even kind of fathomed this idea. When the circumstances right, people like yourself start thinking, okay, how can we find a solution to this current problem? How can we keep doing what we're doing?
Yeah, it's all about having that mindset of solving problems and having that appetite for change and uncertainty. So, I mean, you can bring in more regulations. I mean, you wouldn't find a market more heavily regulated in the housing market than in the Netherlands.
Right.
The government, they literally draconian. They would not allow landlords to raise rents up to a certain bracket. And if you are a homeowner and you want to rent your property out, they would never, ever give consent to let. They'll rather repossess your property.
Wow.
And kick you out. So does it still work in the Netherlands? Yes, but not all the strategies. For example, lease option would probably not work in the Netherlands because you can't rent the property out.
Yeah.
But can you source a deal and flip it? The answer is yes. Can you buy it below the market value? The answer is yes. So you're going to have to be smart and just be, just like what Bruce Lee said, be like water.
Yeah. Just flow through.
Yeah.
So, Vincent, you achieved a huge amount over the last decade, 2 decades in terms of in property and in business. What keeps driving you? What sort of gets you out of bed and excites you every morning?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I guess it's very much in my DNA. I think that the different levels of motivation, I think on the surface of it, people think that I'm doing it for the money. I think that they're really missing the point. Entrepreneurs, I think most people up to a certain level, money doesn't motivate them. Although it's welcome. I mean, I'm not a hypocrite to say I don't like money coming in. Of course I do. I'm doing it because all the pains and pleasures are actually keeping me alive. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel that I'm growing and also I'm making a difference.
Yeah.
And it's an unfinished business because my business as an organization is not exactly where it needs to be. And that gives me a huge amount of motivation to do it. So I don't think about how many hours I need to work. I've been working non-stop through the whole weekend. In fact, I work harder now than I ever did when I was working as a pharmacist many years ago, counting pills. I have more stress than I ever did, but it's these pains and stimuli that actually wake me up, and I love that. And maybe at a personal level, it's a lot to do with my upbringing. I grew up in a family that really frowned upon failure, and I had a very strict father. You know, I was put down a lot.
Okay.
And I really didn't have any self-worth. Completely. And it's only until very late in my life, I was quite a late starter. I didn't really, I went to business school when I was 27. When I graduated after, 2-3 years with a whole load of debt, I didn't know anything about business. That's the irony of having an MBA degree.
I remember once on stage, I was listening to you said, I've got an MBA, it's more about bugger all.
Yeah, Master of Bugger All, that's what it stood for, exactly that. Yeah. And so I just found that I wanted to live life on my terms, whatever they were, whatever it's going to be, whether it's going to be good or bad. And that creates a lot of conflict and animosity between me and my father. I don't really talk much about that. We don't really talk to each other because he still feels that I should have stuck to my career as a pharmacist because it was steady. I think maybe part of it was because he wanted to protect me because he was a businessman himself and he went through a lot of hardships in his days. And he just didn't want me to go down that route. But I think that actually destroyed me for many years. And so I decided to do the very opposite of what my father wanted, was a safe career, out of rebellion and also for myself, self-worth. And then I grew to become very stubborn, wanting to really take this business to the level where I believe it deserved to be. And my shareholders now, I have a responsibility to them.
Yes. I think I can very much relate to your story and journey, particularly in an Asian culture. It's very hard push in terms of education. You need to do well. Doctor, engineer, accountant, these are the roles. These are the ones that please the parents because it's also an era of respect for them as well. But that's not the only route to success these days. There's so many other ways. I think slowly, especially in our communities, I think it's becoming slightly more and more acceptable that actually the formal academic route isn't the only way to do well financially in this world.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, all the people that I wanted to be, the professions, when I studied pharmacy, that's when I couldn't get into medical school to be a doctor or a dentist. And then after graduating from the MBA, I wanted to be a banker, I wanted to be a trader, I wanted to be the swinging someone in the city.
Yeah.
I never got any of those jobs. And now these people are either learning from me or working for me. So it depends on how you want to define success. If success is what you want to show others because of your outward appearance, your wealth, you drive a smart car, then I guess that's success for you. But if success is about realizing your fullest potential, I always have this image of me, on my deathbed. When I look back, what would I say? Yeah, I've taken everything, I've given it a go with this life, or am I going to be full of regrets? I should have done this, or I should have done that. I think research apparently says most people on the deathbeds regret the things they haven't done rather than the things that they've done that screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. One thing you shared a moment ago about working very hard, and sometimes people think you're constantly chasing more money. And I've been fortunate enough to spend time with some very, very financially successful, wealthy people. And even in their 70s, they're still working very hard. They're driven. They want to achieve more. And it's not the more money that drives them. It's wanting to make a difference, wanting to achieve something, living to your full potential. That drives people much more. And I think many, in the most humble, successful people I've met, their life doesn't change. Another million, 10 million doesn't make any difference to their life. It's just a metric. It's just a number.
Right.
Yeah.
So why is Arnold Schwarzenegger still making movies? I remember once he said, I think it was like 25 years ago, he said, I'm worth 60 million now, but when I was worth 40 million, I was just as happy.
Yeah.
So what is driving these people to continue producing, great films, great music, and push the business to the next level? And I think the people who don't have the money automatically fall into the trap of thinking that money is the end goal. Mm-hmm. But then again, you look at a lot of suicides actually are from people who are immensely wealthy. Mm-hmm. And there was a very famous Chinese-American singer called Coco Lee who just committed suicide in her 40s. Hugely successful, immensely wealthy, looked fantastic, but why? Mm-hmm. So, of course, the underlying illnesses, perhaps depression, but money really it can't be the motivating factor. It does solve the problems that not having money creates.
Yes. But
I think the Maslow hierarchy of needs is that once your basic needs, your money needs are satisfied, you've got to have that self-actualization and more spiritual pursuit that you want to go after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Vincent, just before we wrap up then, what would you like the next 5 years to look like in your life? Well, what do you see happening?
Oh, my goodness. I'm getting on a bit now. So
you still look as young as we're
well, I'll try. I don't know. I'm just now focusing more on the now than I ever have. I can't even be so sure that, next year I'll still be here. I think that...
Yeah, tomorrow isn't promised to anybody.
Right. Yeah. I would like to spend more time with my family, maybe with my children in different ways. They're growing up now. When my son called me dad rather than daddy, I knew that now, he's grown up. And, well, I would like my business to really create a legacy. Mm-hmm. I want more people to be educated and they have access to education and information. Good quality information, not a lot of junk out there.
Yeah.
I want world peace. Of course, I think I'm being idealistic. I just want children to grow up believing. If I was going to say to myself, a younger self, what would it be? Is that, what? Don't let people poke the fingers in you and say you are this, that, or you are not this, or you're not that. You can't be this. just make something out of your own life on your own terms.
Yes.
And after all, we're not here forever. So next 5 years, who knows? I would like to contribute more to humanity and give more than I've taken. I'm very, very blessed. We'll see. Hopefully, maybe 5 years later, I'll come back and do another interview.
Vincent, thank you so much.
No, pleasure is mine.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Good.